She's a political theorist. She has returned to us the necessity of organizing in a party, of reusing the word comrade. Right now I'm reading the book she published in 2019, Comrade, an essay on political belonging. So this whole congregation is actually a unwanted disturbance for me reading this book. It is an incredible book. It's so well written, so well thought through. She's not talking about masses, she's not talking about friends, she's not talking about allies, she's talking about comrades, as people who stand next to each other in solidarity, reaching towards a shared horizon. In her words, comradeship is not a magical solution to all problems facing the left, but it's the only form through which these problems might be solved. Anything less will doom us to the competition, individualism, cynicism, and melancholia into which we've descended. To be a left at all, we have to be a comrade. So it's a pleasure and an honor to give the floor to Comrade Jodi Dean.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Jonas. Thanks so much for the whole event. Jonas asked me to talk about more than human comrades, about propagating comradeship with non-human objects. People likely recall Alexander Rodchenko's famous line that our things in our hands must be equals, comrades. Writing around the same time, the US-American socialist George D. Herron evoked comrade bees and comrade stars. Herron made comrade into a new prefix, denoting the extraordinary changes that socialism would bring about. He used the term to propagate a vision of a radically egalitarian future when exploitation and ownership have become extinct. There's a difference, though, between Herron's and Rodchenko's comrades. Herron's are part of a future. Rodchenko's are part of the political struggle to produce that future. The rest of his line about comrade objects continues, and not these black and mournful slaves as they are here. When Rodchenko refers to comrade objects, he situates them on one side of a divide. We have to see, feel, hold the things in our hands, not as if they are a separate and subjugated race, but with us as equals in the struggle against oppression, against slavery, and for communism. Objects are not neutral bystanders, an impossibility in the divided setting of the political. Objects are comrades fighting alongside us. What the objects are isn't fixed and given, and neither are we. They are making us, we are making them, and together we are making something else. On the same side in a political struggle, we're equally instruments for revolution, equally indispensable, equally worthy of care, equally getting our purpose from communism as our common end. When we talk about propagating comradeship, we can talk about cultivating a vision of radical equality, repair, and regeneration, upholding such visions as necessary for dismantling capitalism, predation, extractivism, and occupation. Here we're using Comrade to help imagine new kinds of relations where people and the planet can thrive. Comradeship then names the ideal that has replaced ownership, property, and exploitation in our human and non-human relationships. We can also talk about comradeship and propagating comradeship as building courage, strength, and endurance, as producing or assembling a collective political will irreducible to its elements. Here, comradeship is more necessity, imperative than it is ideal, although given how hierarchy, individualism, and competition shape our relations under capitalism, comradeship still involves an ideal often difficult to achieve. If strength comes from comrades, what does this entail for comrade objects? How do they engender and reinforce the will to fight to bring about the world we want to see? I argue that as comrades, we are objects. The relation between comrades is a relation between objects whose end is the revolutionary struggle for communism. It doesn't matter if some of us are humans. I'm going to set this out more systematically. That comrades are those on the same side of a political struggle means that, one, the relation between comrades is a political relation, not kin or friends. Two, that it's political means that it's conditional on an underlying division. Three, comradeship entails taking a side rather than refusing to acknowledge sides or purporting to transcend them. And four, comradeship is an exclusive relationship. Not all relations are comradely. We don't share comrade relations with everyone and everything. Not everyone or everything is our comrade, although anyone or anything could be. This leads to the question of determining who or what is a comrade. How do we know? My claim is that equality with comrade objects depends on recognizing in practice that we too are objects in the service of revolution. We are created, made, assembled. We are elements in larger composites. We are tools, means, weapons, instruments, crops, machines to be deployed in the struggle for communism. Belonging on the same side gives comradeship its generic quality. With respect to revolution, we are the same. Comradeship requires the dissolution of attachments to uniqueness, personality, hierarchy, and the fantasy of self-sufficiency. So it's not about the subjectivity of things, but about the relation that configures our objectivity. And what I'm going to do is explore this idea by considering two visions. Let me go back on this a bit. Let me go back to there. I'm going to consider two visions of relations with comrade objects. Andrei Platonov's account of comrades in his novel Chevengor, and Yahya Senwar's Stick. From very different locations, roughly a century apart, early 20th century fiction investigating the challenge of building communism in the context of the devastations of civil war, and early 21st century reality struggling for national liberation in the context of occupation and genocide. These, from very different places, these two link us to the challenges of collective survival in a setting of extinction. So I'm going to start with Chevengor, which is like a completely, totally weird novel, loosely based on a town on the Russian steppes in the last years of the Civil War. It was completed in 1928, but first and only partially published in Russian in 1972. In the novel, Platonov uses the words comrade and communism as part of an inchoate post-revolutionary vocabulary of rupture, longing, loss, and possibility. The new world has not fully arrived, and where it has, as in the surreal Chevengor, its arrival doesn't look anything like what anyone expected. There are new words, but rather than making sense of the present, they augment its strangeness. For some, the new words are utopian, aspirational, indispensable to the radical project of social reimagination. Others find themselves using the same words to describe the catastrophic conditions in which they endeavor to persist. After all, the abolition of classes, property, and work can take different forms. Rather than focusing on relations among revolutionary Bolsheviks, Platonov highlights the comradeship of the wandering, propertyless, classless, post-revolutionary bastard people. They are the miscellaneous or others. The Russian word is prochya. Maria Chernadsky explains that early Soviet documents used the term prochya when the class identity of a person was unknowable. Platonov's prochya are remnants, mistakes, and remainders, proletarianized even of their class identity. They embody the melancholic moment of revolution when classes have dissolved, exploitation has ended, and the new society is painfully struggling to be born. Piled in a heap for warmth on the edge of Chevengor, these half-naked, starving, orphaned masses are the poorest of the poor. They are characterized by loss, by not being anybody at all. Their destitution has not resulted in atomized individuals isolated in egoistic self-interest. Rather, this destitution produces comradeship as the 0 point of relationality necessary to continue and thus for communism. The others are bereft of subjectivity, a heap of objects relying on each other. Platonov writes, "The new Chevangurians had no joys before them and none that they expected, and thus they remained satisfied with that which all unpropertied people possess, a life shared with people identical for them, companions and comrades for the roads through which they pass." Comrades here are what is left after everything else is gone. Remainders and ruins, the negative place of beginning. Nothing distinguishes them. For each other, they are identical. The others have nothing but each other because they have nothing. One might imagine here the idea of bare life, but that misses the pile, the fact that they're all piled up in a heap on the edge of town, right? And the many things necessary simply for life. Even bare life requires others, human and non-human. It's never singular and always for something or someone else. Platonov describes the others as bearing a hope that was confident and successful, but sad as loss. Hope is not accompanied by joy, but by sadness. It's engendered by loss, a response to loss. Loss is accompaniment. No hope without loss. Platonov specifies what was precise in the other's hope. If the main thing, staying alive and whole, were successfully accomplished, then everything and anything else remaining would be accomplished, even if it were necessary to reduce the world to its last grave. No one and nothing stays alive and whole on its own. A slew of relations, connections are entailed, the others who keep us warm, bodies, blankets, sticks. Staying alive and whole isn't a certainty, it's a possibility, a hope. It may not be realized, and its realization may cost everything. The miscellaneous others in a heap on a step have hope because they've lost everything. If they stay alive, it will take everything, could take anything, such that staying alive will mean that everything worked out, problems solved, issues resolved, barriers dissolved, with all the destruction that entails. There's a strange opposition between the German and the Russian words for comrade. The German Genosse is linked to genießen, enjoy or to enjoy. It's associated with the shared use or enjoyment of something, with a common relation to property along the lines of a right of use, usufruct. One etymology of the Russian tavarish is tavar, a good for sale, a commodity thing. The opposition between these word origins seems clear in Chevengur. Platonov opposes property and comradeship. Acquisition of property leads to the loss of comradeship. People put their energy into possessions instead of each other. Platonov writes, when property lies between people, the people calmly expend their powers on worrying about that property. But when there is absolutely nothing between people, then they begin not to part and to preserve one another from the cold as they sleep. Comradeship results from the absence of property, not its shared use or enjoyment. As one of the characters in the novel says, "And I say to you that we are all comrades only when there is identical trouble for everybody. As soon as there is bread and property, why, you'll never get a man out of it." The initial opposition between the German and Russian origins of comrade may actually be too quick. Platonov's treatment of the prochia introduces another kind of property, the collective self-possession of the unpropertied. Perhaps these proletarians and miscellaneous served one another as each other's sole possession and worth in life, and thus they looked with such concern at one another, not paying much attention to Chevengur, and carefully kept their comrades free from flies, just as the bourgeoisie had once guarded their homes and livestock. Each comrade is a thing, an object for the other. It's all that they have, which means that the miscellaneous have something to take care of. The intimate physicality of mutual care gives us a comradeship of the destitute, where things, Tavari, enjoy genießen each other. Now, such instrumentalization might seem horrifying, but why? What's being held on to? And how does that holding on reinforce our investment in oppression, exploitation, extraction, and occupation? Platonov gives us destitution as the zero level of comradeship, hope from loss, and mutual use. These aren't ideals. They are conditions, necessities, premises of the struggle for communism. Destitution is the negative dimension of the relation between comrades, born from the realization of revolutionary destruction, that is, the destruction of our ties to the oppressive order. From the position of the communist future already being built in Chevengor, the destitution of the remaindered others manifests as comradeship. It's the perspective of communism that views their desolation not as an end, but as an opening to something heretofore ungraspable, namely, what remains when all is lost, comradeship, an intimately material relation of people, nature, and things, intertwined with perseverance's desperate, unavoidable dependence. The comradely Chevengorians don't expect joy, but that joy is unexpected does not mean it's impossible. And so now I'm going to move to Sinwar's stick. As you know, Yahya Sinwar is the Hamas leader credited with planning the Al-Aqsa flood operation. Israeli soldiers killed him in Rafah on October 16th. He and several other Hamas militants were fired on by troops who actually didn't know who they were shooting at. It could have been anyone. Sinwar went up to the second floor of a nearby building that was then shelled by a tank. A couple of Israeli soldiers began to sweep the building, and Sinwar threw grenades at them. They retreated and sent in a drone. Sinwar threw a stick at the drone. The drone flinched as the stick lunged toward it. The next day, when Israeli soldiers returned to find the body, they still didn't know who they'd killed. They had to cut off Sinwar's finger and send it to a lab to be sure. Since the release of the drone video, a new expression has arisen in Arabic social media, Asa al-Sinwar, Sinwar's stick. The expression is used to refer to an act of resistance, giving absolutely everything, unyielding until the end. It means you've tried absolutely everything and had nothing else left except a stick. You've done all that you could, given it your all, become utterly depleted, and there at the end is the stick, marking the all of depletion, and you give that too. And so does the stick, which you couldn't give without it. At this point, the object in your hand is your equal, neither of you able to do much more than the other. The all of depletion is non-all. The negativity of loss remains. The stick flies toward the drone, showing it a will and a power that the drone will not be able to stop propagating. The stick is like the kites Hamas used to start fires on Israeli-occupied territory in 2018 during the Great March of Return. The kites, Sinwar explained to an Italian journalist, are just twine and paper and an oil-soaked rag, while each battery of the Iron Dome cost $100 million. Those kites say, you are immensely more powerful, but you will never win. Really, never. The stick says the same thing. You may have killed this man who just released me, but you will never win. We don't know what the stick was made of or how long it accompanied Sinwar. It was there for him when he needed it. It appears in social media in the hands of young people as if they've picked it up and will throw it again and again. Instrumentalization is the subordination of some ends to other ones, the triumph or determination of one goal or purpose over other ones. Kant tried to teach us that this was morally wrong. We should always treat others as ends in themselves and never as a means only. Lingering Kantianism may be why some are so deeply skeptical of revolutionary parties and militant political formations. We so fear the punishing effects of the categorical imperative that we attach ourselves to an always impossible version of autonomy. Or maybe we just want to hold on to our own investments in the institutions that recognize and reward us, and so we champion ethics over politics. The relation between comrades, though, is political. It's produced for a purpose that subordinates other aims or goals, sometimes to the point of extinction. Objects are necessary for the collective political subject to emerge. If we don't become objects, our values stemming not from the purity of our intentions, but from availability, presence, readiness to do what needs to be done, we aren't comrades and we won't win. Sinwar's stick propagates comradeship as it incites the conviction that the struggle is worth everything. Comrades give it all for the struggle, more than they have, more than they can. The images and commentaries circulating after Sinwar's death suggest an unexpected joy. Persevering beyond individual hope inspires hope for the collective. The end, the goal, the people is worth everything it takes. Sinwar's stick. Platonov's Chevengurians and Sinwar's stick draw out for us the negativity of the comrade, the unavoidable destitution and desolation that accompany revolutionary struggle. Comrade relations are relations between objects that acquire their purpose from an end outside of them. This end disciplines them, uses them, takes from them more than they can give, and in so doing makes them capable of fighting for the world that we want.
I think that one works too. Thank you, Jodi, so much. Can you do the whole thing again just for us to grasp the beauty and the meaning of every sentence that you gave us? Just one question, because I'm totally wrong-footed by this story because it gives us so much more than we already expected. Sinwar's stick outlives Sinwar. So the object outlives the human being. You were asked here to speak about non-human, more than human comrades. Sinwar's stick is a great example of that. The planet will outlive us. So what does this story mean in that sense, that the objects who are our comrades will live longer than we will?
I don't think I can answer that, but I don't think that's a trivial non-answer. I think it's like, I'll put it this way, we don't know what anything means for the stick because it's a stick, right? And so, but it does have, it does continue. Yeah. It does exist in some way. And so there's a continuation that is beyond whatever we might want to say about it or think about it. But if we're going to talk about it or say about it, that's within the context of our struggles. So we can talk about the continuation of the earth for us with it, but anything else would be a kind of speculation for us while we are here thinking about that. Yeah?
Thanks. And I completely understand why you cannot give an answer. None of us here could give an answer to that. I'm asking because we're in this context where we were thinking about 94 million years of non-human cohabitation, which is still surrounding us. So the story is always longer and deeper than we are. We'll continue later. Good. I'm sure everyone's going outside now for 15 to 20 minutes of deep silence and reflection on what Jodi just gave us. After that, we'll return to continue. Thank you.
Thank you.